This week on the podcast, we are talking with Kariesha Martinez, our digital advertising whaler, and myself on this internal whole whale podcast talking about COVID trends, opportunities, and strategies that we frankly wanted to gather together and discuss because they're so top of mind right now. Hey, Kariesha.
Hey, George. How you doing?
You know what I like about the first piece of every conversation that we have these days is how are you doing? I think a lasting effect to just jump into trend is that how are you doing is going to actually mean something to the people of this generation in a way that it just didn't before. Because when you say how are you doing, it's like, how is your family doing? How is your health doing? How is your mental state working from home and everything that entails doing? And people wait and hear the answer. And I think in terms of looking at this apocalyptic tragedy we're going through right now, I like looking for bright spots. And so, Kariesha, I'll ask you, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm in good health. My family's in good health. I'm still employed. So life is great right now.
It's all about the Delta. I know, though, you actually dealt with a little bit of COVID in your ecosystem, though. Is that correct?
Yeah. My stepdad had the coronavirus, tested positive and everything. It was rough. It started with just a cough, a cold, really high fevers. Still talked about feeling a little like he's hallucinating a little bit. After a couple days, we sent him to the ER where he stayed for 5 or 6 days. And when he came back, he was totally quarantined. Nobody could stay in the room with him. My mom had to play nurse and bring up all his food and everything that he needed. He's good now. He's been quarantined for about 3 weeks, so we feel like that's a good amount of time for him to come back to the rest of everybody. But yeah, he lost a lot of weight. It was tough, but he's doing a lot better now and higher spirits. No fever, no cough.
Yeah.
Tough.
I mean, it's hitting. If you don't know somebody, you know somebody who knows somebody, and it's going to continue to happen. And so I think, anytime we're, talking about business or interviewing people, it's important to know that within a 1 degree of connection, they or someone they know is absolutely going through something. And yet we soldier on. So thank you for continuing to show up to work. And I'm also glad that we have jobs, Kariesha.
Yeah, that's always the silver lining, right?
So I want to come back to a big thought on the trends and opportunities as we go through this in a quote from The Obstacle is the Way, the timeless art of turning adversity into advantage by Ryan Holiday. The quote is, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition." I am a firm believer that while this is terrible, there are tremendous opportunities if we're willing to look at it and find it in the right way. And so first, I want to say, in terms of trends, some of the downward pressure that we're beginning to see across clients and the sector is that there's going to be a reduction in giving. The New York Times on April 16th put out an initial chart of the change in spending from 2019 for the weeks ending in April 1st to the present, up leading to current corona timeframe, showing things like general merchandise and e-commerce increasing, food delivery up 50%, video streaming up 45%. And then on the negative side, people spending money on, obviously, movie theaters, airlines, and cruises are down 98%, 70%. But charitable giving also snuck into that chart, and it definitely threw a flag for me because that seemed to be around 35% down on trends. Kariesha, can you give me any sort of stories or anecdotes you've seen across, some of our clients or nonprofits you've seen in terms of fundraising hits?
Yeah, I think the first that comes to mind is with one of our clients who does some Facebook fundraisers. Usually we see maybe 1 to 2, even 3 a week, but within the past half, there haven't been any new ones. They're also zodiac sign theme. So maybe there just aren't many Tauruses happening right now. But yeah, I've definitely seen that decline. And even in the Facebook fundraisers that we have had, there haven't been as many gifts, and the gifts have been a bit lower than usual.
Yeah, there's a cooling off for sure. You know, the other big trend we've seen is the sort of cancellation of events, and a lot of fundraisers, spring fundraisers for almost, I can't even keep count anymore. All of our clients seemed to have had to have canceled an event to last minute sort of be like, can we get away with, you know, doing a different version of this, a safer version? We'll have hand sanitizer, and like they're getting canceled, and so too is the expected revenue from that. And so, you know, that sadly also is another trend on it, and that includes the sort of peer-to-peer fundraising ecosystem of every run, bike, walk, of these gatherings of folks that raise money with these traditional events, and we're losing those. One thing in terms of, you know, opportunities and things to prepare for, I'd say, is I don't think this is going away anytime soon. And gatherings of over 100 people, if that's what your event relies on, if you're preparing for a sudden fall, miraculous comeback of our ability to congregate in large numbers, I would say that's suspect. There is a huge risk to that. And so right now the opportunity would be, how do we plan ahead so we make this a virtual fundraising event, and whatever that means. What do you think about that, Kariesha?
Yeah, and I think it's surprising that there aren't more platforms that cater to virtual fundraising events. One thing that I've loved that's happening right now is a lot of like freelancers who are maybe artists or dancers or fitness people are turning to Instagram Live and showing off and showcasing their talents in order to get some sort of income. It's not necessarily fundraising, but I think there's definitely some correlations that organizations can definitely take from.
Yeah. So let's jump to that trend too, because you know, one thing we see has been a shift to organizing in digital impact, and this whole like idea of saying like, well, wait a minute, we used to provide these in-person engagements, this person-to-person activity. How do we digitize it? One group, I have to say I have insider knowledge of because I am married to their chief program officer, is One Love Foundation. One Love Foundation working to end relationship violence, improve relationship health of people, specifically young people, high school and college age. And they had these amazing in-person sort of viewing and discussion groups that they did. And like all of a sudden overnight, like you can't walk into a school and bring together 300 kids. So what they've started doing are these regular scheduled thematic webinars that offer the same type of viewing and discourse opportunities, and they're doing it over Zoom, and they're like, you know, they're oversubscribed, and they turn this around almost overnight, and
Wow.
are having decent success with it. So your point is well taken, right? Like if you were in the business of cutting hair, of teaching people music, of dancing, of whatever it was, like you're scrambling to do that, and I think nonprofits have to follow in suit.
Yeah, and I also wonder how long it'll be until a competitor comes up to Zoom and is like, hey, we also provide web calls, webinars, all of that, but you can also digitally fundraise. It should be interesting to see a little bit of competition.
Yeah.
I know there's like Microsoft Teams, but it's not the same.
Well, you got the Hangouts, you have, you know, all these different platforms, but that's an interesting point. So Facebook Fundraising Live has that feature for your nonprofit if you wanted to run a Facebook Live event and do that. Clearly, it's a one-to-many. It's not like a many-to-many in the sort of nature of like we're having a conversation. I've seen people using Zoom backgrounds with like their PayPal links on it or their Venmo links on it. We have tons of like content on like helping your nonprofit set up a business account for Venmo and tossing that up there to accept funds on that. So that's an interesting point. Let's see. What other trends do you want to pull up for us, Kariesha?
I feel like it's always important to bring up the work from home fatigue. I really resonate with that. I don't live in New York, I live in New Jersey, but I also live with 6 other people, which is a lot. My mom, she's a speech language pathologist. So she's on calls all day doing telehealth. My stepdad is a psychologist with the DOE, so he's always there making calls. And it's a lot. My family is usually very loud, so to have to keep quiet all day, let each other know about different times of different meetings, scavenging for food every couple hours is a very new lifestyle for us. And it's kind of hard. We've become very cranky people.
Yeah, and I can say anybody who has got a child has just opened up a daycare center for themselves and education center and have been given a whole new full-time job. And I'm literally like muting in between like crying children in the background. It's very real. And so what we're going to see in terms of, let's get back to like as a trend, is if you have a large swath of the population going through this, there are going to be opportunities for your nonprofit to step in and at least empathize with the parents in the audience, in the people who are, living with a number of other relatives. Like many of our staff have gone home with their parents, and now they're like living in a space that wasn't necessarily designed to have all of those humans there. So how does your nonprofit consider that in your messaging to your stakeholders, making that appeal and shaping that? And we're gonna start to touch more and more on our COVID adjacent communication strategies. And I also hope, Kariesha and I will be talking to more and more nonprofits about how they are adjusting that framing, but that is a big pain point. And we think about our audience's pain points when we craft our strategies, our campaigns, and our asks. And if you're getting in the mindset, like that is the mindset right now. One positive, yeah. You have something to add on that?
Yeah, I was just about to say the positive part, I think, that I love is just being able to spend more time with family. I don't know if that's what you were going to say, but I don't think I've ever spent this much time with my family. And it's good and bad. They're kind of annoying sometimes, but I really cherish this time. And I don't know, maybe if you feel like you wouldn't have been able to spend as much time with your kids as before, but I think that kind of family aspect can definitely be some type of messaging in terms of virtual fundraising, keeping up with family activities in terms of email asks. I think there's definitely a way to spin that.
Yeah, our activities, putting out a free guide around what you can do with your kids around a cause. We just went through Earth Day not too long ago, and the opportunity to say, hey, here's a resource that you may find valuable. And guess what? 2, 3, 4 months down the road, when it's time to give, it may also help in that narrative for them remembering that you were, being helpful and putting something out there. On the topic of Earth Day, one positive trend is that we're seeing a projected reduction in carbon emissions, 6% globally, 25% projected in China. And these are just early estimates. And this is coming from carbonrelief.org, but also like common sense. No one's flying, no one's driving. We're being actually a lot more efficient at home by doing this. So, ironically, since its founding in 1970, Earth Day, we'll probably have the lowest emissions on an Earth Day in all of history. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah, the Earth living a little longer is always a positive thing. But I think a lot of things on like Twitter and TikTok I'm really a fan of are saying that the Earth is healing, like humans are the virus. But I feel like that we haven't really put our attention and focus into finding ways to live lives that would be more helpful and protective of the Earth. If we can work from home more or even avoid driving some more, there are definitely ways that the Earth can be less polluted.
Yeah, I forced to agree. And then in terms of this, the danger can potentially be that like, oh, well, we solved this. And so for environmental organizations listening out there, they're like, oh, I'm using less, the complacency is the enemy here. And by the way, if you are deep in this field, frankly, you happen to know that we would need a COVID-like event every single year for the next decade to avoid the 1.5 degrees Celsius change that was anticipated for our good old planet Earth. But it's interesting if you're communicating in that ecosystem. The next point, Kariesha and I were joking about still having our jobs, which, delightful we have our job still and should continue to, is that we're tracking past 20% unemployment. I think this has a massive trickle down impact potentially on giving and what your expectations should be. And so just, off the bat, you should be looking at your overall annual giving and say, you know what, if we have 20% unemployment and essentially for at least a entire quarter of the economy has effectively been shut down, it is rational to say, hey, let's just give our financial budget that we planned for in the early fiscal year a 25% haircut, just off of the top. Because this is going to have huge impacts. Yes, people are getting stimulus checks. Yes, people are getting very, fair amounts from their, unemployment checks. But like the first thing you're thinking of is not necessarily donations. When you're in a Maslow hierarchy of needs, of shelter, of food, the higher order thinking of self-actualization in the Maslow, if you remember it, that's where giving tends to be up there. So that sort of feeds into that haircut. On the plus side, opportunity. Damn it. On the plus side for this, I will say that this is a great time that nonprofits actually financially don't follow markets in the same way. During 2008, they didn't see the same hit that other groups did. Certainly it was down, but it doesn't track in the same way that the S&P or Dow Jones does. And in fact, if you are hiring right now, this can be a great time to find top talent if you have the cash flow. Because of this unemployment rate, frankly, there's a lot of talent out there that can be scooped up. And so if you have that job description, remember, it takes, easily 6 to 12 months to find a C-suite level person. If you have a grant coming in the future and you think this is coming, it may be worth to see who's out there and post some of those jobs on sites like idealist.org.
Definitely.
And by the way, I think salary negotiations look a little different right now.
Yeah, just a bit.
What have you seen around the sort of unemployment trends and nonprofit job pieces, Kariesha?
Yeah, not necessarily nonprofit related, but definitely a lot of layoffs, especially for people who were in my graduating class, who just kind of started at their entry-level position, really taking a big cut all over LinkedIn, looking for jobs in sales, marketing, etc. But on the flip side, I feel like, especially for younger people in the job market, I think it's definitely an opportunity to explore different job opportunities, job options, job fields. Oftentimes, one of the biggest fears is falling into a job and just not knowing how you end up there for 10 years. So maybe this is a push to follow a dream you never really thought about.
Yeah, you just think about it like you were just standing there and suddenly lightning struck you. You're like, I thought that was a pretty safe career choice I was choosing, and all of a sudden the rules of engagement change overnight. One thing to consider, you're talking about, hey, use this as an opportunity for self-improvement. One opportunity and strategy that we see for nonprofits in this sense is consider the fact that 1 in 5 people just lost their job. What does job training look like in the context of how your organization provides services? What does resume help? What does interview prep? What does online course creation look for your organization if you're developing things? Shameless plug for Howell University, which has many courses on helping you understand digital marketing, analytics in the nonprofit sector, which happens to be hiring. This could be an opportunity for your organization to create that package that serves the audience of people potentially looking for jobs in this, probably extended period of time.
Definitely.
All right. What else do we have, Kariesha, on our list of items that we wanted to share in this we'll call COVID rambling?
Something that's kind of near and dear to my heart are ads. Inventory going down a bit, which, as I've heard you talk about before, may help the Google ad grant. One, because the Google ad grant is usually bottom of the list when it comes to being served in terms of paid ads. Regular paid Google search ads usually come to the top. So if ads budgets are down, then maybe our Google ad grants will have more spend coming up, more clicks, click-through rate, and hopefully more impact as we go down our funnel of engagement.
Yeah, just as a reminder the Google ad grant is that free $10,000 in search advertising given to 501c3s that qualify, ultimately showing up after all of the official paid ads on Google search. What we're seeing pretty much across the board and logically is there are fewer advertisers, right? If there are no longer events, cruise lines, airlines, if there are no longer many little local service shops and restaurants advertising on these platforms as small businesses, it's a marketplace, and it's a competitive marketplace where the position is in part based on how many people want to pay to show up for the search result, local activities. Well, if that's decreasing and you have local activities and budget to spend, well, you're probably going to show up more prominently. If you are paying to play on these platforms, you're going to be getting a better price than before, which is wild because we were at the beginning of this year anticipating the exact opposite happening because we were in a political cycle unlike none other, with more money being spent on digital than ever before. We were going to be seeing and anticipating more ads around the census and taking up that type of channel, and instead it's all COVID all the time, and a lot less actually on the inventory side, which may present opportunities for your nonprofit to catch value in a pay-to-play environment or a Google ad grant scenario. All right. Another one that I wanted to talk about in here are what I'm going to call Stampede Grants. Basically, I every week hear about yet another, organization, federal, state, city, foundation, or, rando billionaire opening up their fund to fix everything. And then there's a stampede, which inevitably crashes the website, and they effectively run out in the first 24 hours of whatever money they have. Unfortunately, it's you kind of have to be a part of it because it's, a prisoner's dilemma. If you don't, they will. And so I'm calling these Stampede Grants because they form a giant stampede. We kind of can waste our time on these conforms that are crashing and pieces, but they are absolutely a trend, and it's going to continue to happen. And the Fed just Congress just went ahead and approved another small PPP loan. The payroll protection is getting more funds, which does apply. The PPP does apply to nonprofits. The PPP loan, if you haven't already, put your hat in the ring. It's a forgivable loan if you're keeping your staff at the right level based on the rules there, and it's worth checking out for your organization. I will say I may have had a couple angry Twitter tirades at organizations unable to keep their websites up. This is just ridiculous. Yeah. You knew it was coming. You knew it was coming.
You had one job.
You had one job. You had one job. A web form. Use Google Forms. Okay. We are. Is there one you want to pick up on in here, Kariesha?
Yeah. Let's look at this quarantine versus reopen rallies, lockdown protests that are happening. Basically, people are upset that they have to stay home, wanting to go out, wanting to work, and rightfully so. If you've been laid off for whatever reason and the government isn't giving you any relief in that kind of sense, it's very helpless. It's a helpless feeling to have to sit home and do nothing while rent is still being collected, bills are still needing to be paid. So a lot of people have been protesting to have the states reopen with some kind of convoluted messaging around it, thinking of this quarantine as stripping them of their human rights, relating it to slavery at some point, which is hard and sad to see. But at the same time, health is important. And if it means that people will survive by staying home, then I think that's more of a governmental issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, the Daily on 422 had an episode about the protests and the backing of it coming from, like, they didn't have to work very hard to find many Republican donors backing that, and law firms that are directly connected to the president connecting to that as part of the backing for. I'm not even gonna edit that out. This is what working from home looks like. That was a baby monitor in the background, but you know, to your point, like, here's what I see happening as a trend that's important to pay attention to, because the new rift that will arise, it will be the economic versus the human welfare arguments of go back to work, open up, versus like letting vulnerable populations suffer as a result of that. And at a certain point, economics will have to win out, but it's at what point we want to do that, and it will be politicized and unfortunately driven along somehow party lines again, where this will intensify more and more, suck more oxygen out of the room, and focus on, libertarian arguments and thinly veiled funded efforts by, whatever connection to the White House, whatever connection to the RNC and RNC donors to get things back open so it looks better for a re-election attempt of what's going on. But this is going to be a big battle. And so my recommendation is to stay the heck away from it as a nonprofit, because I think it's too loaded and also presents risks. And no matter what side you're on, there are going to be people that in the sort of unfair narrative of history be able to go back and be like, well, you supported this and people died. Well, you supported this and the economy died. And you're like, there are just no winners in this. And so the opportunity or strategy would be, I would say, stay away from that. And in terms of your COVID adjacent communication, focus on the plight of your stakeholders and what they're going through. Shape whatever fundraising campaign you're planning around how it is helping the people that are in need. I'm really excited. Kariesha is going to be talking to a homelessness expert on how COVID is impacting our homeless population in our country. So I don't want to give too much away there. But yeah, I kind of choked a little bit as some of those protesters were calling themselves the Rosa Parks of this, and I was like, I feel this is very different.
Got a little convoluted there. Didn't exactly hit the mark.
I lost the thread. Okay, we have gone through, I think, almost all of this. One piece, as we look at disasters and have seen in the past, is I think there's going to be yes, an overall drop in U.S. giving, but I think there's going to be a consolidation of giving due to this disaster mindset. When there is a hurricane, when there is a tsunami, when there is a national event that coalesces attention and focuses it, so too does the dollars given in that particular time frame. So think when there is a hurricane. Well, guess what? The local Fox affiliate and NBC, whoever, they're out there and then saying, hey, by the way, text this to the Red Cross to give them money. And so in that world right now, we have a focusing of attention, and there are certain nonprofits that are on the front lines of this. So coming back to the COVID adjacent communication and campaigning that you may want to be thinking about is, how do you relate your cause to the front line work and the things that are top of mind in framing? So more tangibly, like, what is the COVID plus your term plus action page that you have, and how you're saying, like, this is our work in the context of this need, because there's absolutely going to be a consolidation of giving. So it's not just the fact that we're going to see a 25% drop in potential annual giving. It's that of the 75% remaining, it's probably going to fall along a power law of disproportionate giving toward people on the front line. All right, that's my hot take. I haven't formalized any firm numbers on like what that is, because I feel like numbers change every day.
Especially these days, numbers are climbing and falling with every second passing.
All right. Any other trends and opportunities that you see, Kariesha, that we should bring up? We had a little handy list. We were trying to be organized today.
No, I think you covered all of them. I don't think you answered. How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm super stressed. I feel like my hair length, like how high it's up, the team always jokes about like how stressed I am is like directly correlated to like how many times I go like this. We got some things in the works, but in me personally, it's really hard chasing our two kids around and doing that, and like babies crying in the background and not being able to like have dedicated focused work. I've been working a lot at night, so like when they go to sleep, I go back to work, and you just feel like you don't get a breath.
Yeah.
And then like at the same token, like in my mind constantly is like making sure that, am I working as hard? Am I thinking as well as I can to make sure I ensure the jobs of every whaler is protected? Like, so it's like, I'm getting more used to it, but there's stress, I'll say. But I'll keep my hair down. How about that?
Day by day is what I keep telling myself.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm excited. We're putting out this podcast episode. We may do more of these back and forths, but we're going to be looking at a lot more content when we talk to our guests about how they are addressing their COVID adjacent communication and adapted strategies, because I think it is one thing to talk about it and one thing to hear actual stories of what's working in the field. We're excited to be bringing that to you. We may also be doing spotlight episodes where sponsors are coming in and saying, hey, can you look at this one piece? And guess what? We're doing everything possible to make sure we are feeding the whales here. And sometimes we will have potential spotlight episodes. If you have content that you'd like us to cover around something that you think will be relevant to our nonprofit audience, feel free to reach out. You know where to find us at Whole Whale. We're all our first name at Whole Whale if you want to ever chase us down. And Kariesha, thank you so much. I'm glad that your stepfather is doing better, and that you are maintaining a base level of sanity in the house with that many folks running around.
Yeah, day by day. Thanks for having me.
All right, this has been episode number 173, right, Kariesha? We decided number 173. You can find resources, as always, at wholewhale.com/podcast. And yes, this will be on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. We reply to them usually. Let us know how you're doing.